As a fellow coffee goer, I find myself at coffee shops and gas stations 24/7 looking for the best cup of coffee. Here are three alternatives for a business partnership between Fast Tracks and South Texas Brew that were evaluated by research criteria to come to a final decision for a proposal. One alternative separates itself in the conclusion of this speech and is a clear winner. Alternative 1. South Texas Brew sells supplies outright to Fast Tracks and services the brewing equipment. Alternative 2. South Texas Brew leases space from Fast Tracks and is responsible for running the coffee shop. Alternative 3. South Texas Brew and Fast Tracks enters a joint venture to operate the coffee shop. Each alternative was evaluated using criteria to ensure the best option for partnership. A. Startup costs. Criteria contains the following. Supplies and equipment services are required for all three alternatives. Construction permits and utilities are used only for alternative 2s and 3. Operating costs. Criteria contains the following. Points of sale. System used in the coffee shop is required and has a one-time purchase fee along with annual maintenance costs. Personnel to operate the coffee shop include 1 full-time, 2 part-time employees for this proposal. Profitability is the bottom line. I am credible to speak on this topic as I did the research and was the research analysis who evaluated each alternative based on specific criteria. Reference below. South Texas Brew partners best with Fast Tracks by selling supplies directly and servicing the coffee brewing equipment. Cost for both parties is the lowest, and to support this I'll show the extensive research criteria results for alternative 1. Using a 150 cup per day sales model, startup costs including supplies and equipment along with construction permits and utility are the same for both alternative 1 and 2. Seasonal flavors and signage will boost customer service. Alternative 1 shows a zero cost for construction permits and utilities. Operation costs for alternative 1 are non-existent. Without cost of construction permits or utilities, alternative 1 has a cost advantage for both parties. Profitability for alternative 1 is minimum. Due to zero cost for operating expenses, the profitability equation shows a good return based on out-of-pocket expenses. Now that I've given you the overview of why alternative 1 is the best decision for both Fast Tracks and South Texas Brewing, I will dive into the details to show you exactly the amounts that support my thesis. As mentioned above, the overall startup costs associated with alternative 1 are the most cost-effective in all alternatives themselves, between 1 and 3. Alternative 1 annual supplies include South Texas Brew, coffees, filters, and seasonal signage. Supplies total $5,343.76. Alternative 1 annual equipment and services include a top-of-the-line Bunsverst Brewwise gallon dual coffee brewer and an annual service agreement charge. The agreement charge totals $2,826.99. Alternative 1 does not require construction or permits. All utility costs are the expense of Fast Track's normal operating budget. Estimated costs for alternative 2 and 3 for construction permits and utilities are $11,200. Construction and permits and utilities total $0. Now the initial startup costs associated with alternative 1 has been outlined. I will now discuss how and why operating expenses are non-existent for this alternative and therefore contribute greatly to alternative 1 being the best overall option for partnership. I will discuss the costs for alternative 2 and 3 in this section to show the vast difference in overall costs. Alternative 1 does not require operating expenses. Point of sale systems are not a requirement for alternative 1. Point of sale costs and annual maintenance agreement total $0. For alternative 2 and 3, the initial cost of POS systems add $2,500. Annual point of sale maintenance agreements to service and update software are not a factor for agreement 1 or alternative 1. Annual maintenance agreements total $0. Alternative 2 and 3 require annual maintenance agreements costing up to $1,200. Personnel are not required for alternative one. Personnel in the form of one full-time manager and two part-time employees for this exercise show that alternative 2 and 3 add the additional cost of $67,000. Benefits for the full-time employees are not included in the cost analysis. As I mentioned, not having operating expenses for the alternative one option makes it the most attractive choice based on the research. But profitability is the bottom line that most corporations are interested in, and profitability for alternative one takes into account startup costs and operating expenses along with an estimated 150 cup monthly revenue. Estimated annual revenue for alternative one is $78,000. When subtracting the startup costs and operating expenses from the estimated annual revenue, alternative one shows an 89.88% profitability percentage. That dollar amount behind the percentage is $70,831.25. Estimated annual revenue for alternative 2 is $380,160. Profitability percentage calculates to 73%. Estimated annual revenue for alternative 3 is $190,080. Ironically, the profitability percentage for alternative 3 calculates to 73%. As I calculated and conclude in my speech and presentation, you may look at the estimated revenue differences as a negative for alternative 1, but let me conclude by showing the operating costs for alternative 2 and 3 in more detail. Alternative 2 requires South Texas Brew to lease space from Fast Tracks and operate the coffee shop. Annual operational costs total $71,194. Alternative 3 is a joint venture between both compromises to operate the coffee shop. Annual costs total $35,597. I would like to revisit the operational cost for alternative 1. There is no cost associated because alternative 1 has South Texas Brew selling supplies direct and servicing equipment. These additional costs for alternative 2 and 3 prove and support my thesis that alternative 1 is the best business decision for both parties. In my introduction, I mentioned a clear winner. Alternative 1 separates itself when starting up costs, operation costs, profitability are calculated using the same research criteria for all alternatives. Numbers don't lie. The percentage of profitability showed that alternative 1 to be the highest choice for both companies, the most profitable in the long run to build the Fast Tracks brand in the South Texas region. Texans love South Texas Brew with their partnership and the way we brew our coffee, and it fits well and pairs well with all the brews of coffee that are nearby in South Texas and are brewed in South Texas. They'll be able to visit a new and exciting convenience store to get their morning wake up and afternoon pick me up quality coffee. I urge Fast Tracks to not delay and to enter into an agreement to start a lasting relationship with South Texas Brew that will make your franchise from the unknown in this region to a new Texas favorites convenience shop for coffee and anything else.